responsibility. So I just wondered if you'd like to reflect on your thoughts about the importance of trust and integrity.
It's fundamental, and of course, you want to go through life trusting the right people.
Yes.
And I've been extraordinarily fortunate in having what I refer to as the right heroes. I mean, they've never let me down, and I've run into plenty of problems here and there, but in terms of the people that I really wanted to pattern myself after,
Yes.
and there's been a dozen at least over my lifetime, and I've never been let down by it, and it's a lot better way to go through life. You've got to be prepared sometime for things going wrong, but in the people that really counted, I never experienced that. Starting, with my dad and my wives and various. I can tell you at age 86, it's been a very good way to go through life.
Absolutely, yeah. And when you say the heroes or the people you've admired, are you including in those the leaders of the companies that you've invested in?
In many cases, but it goes beyond that. Yeah, sure. Obviously, with the companies we buy, we delegate to the point of abdication here, and so I place full trust in them. I mean, we do not have a rules-based operation. We have a principles-based operation,
Yes.
and I want people to respond to principles. But a good bit has come outside of the business arena as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my guess would be that your trust in them, now I'm talking about the businesses, trusting enough so that they felt valued and respected and all of that probably influenced their behavior and maybe even their performance.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people respond to trust. Not everybody does, but basically, my dad always trusted me. He didn't say, end up here, do this, do that, or anything like that. He said, look, whatever you do, I'm for you. Well, 100%, as long as it's honest and productive. And I know it brought out better things in me than if he'd said, unless you do this or that, I'm going to disinherit you or whatever it may be.
Yes.
I really got an education on that from before I can remember.
So trust begets trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I really believe.
Well, right now, as we sit here, I'm trusting about 70 managers, and I write them a letter every 2 years, and I say, we have all the money we need. We'd like to have more money, but we got all we need. We don't have a shred of reputation more than we need, and my reputation and Berkshire's reputation is in your hands. And I tell them, if anything's close to the lines, and you can't make up your mind, call me at home. Now, they don't ever call me at home because they know if it comes up to a situation, they really know the answer.
Yes,
they shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work perfectly, but I think it works better than anything else.
I loved your statement about the ovarian
lottery I've been talking about all my life. Yeah.
Yes. and to me, your willingness, first of all, to see that and say it belongs to another quality that I think is important, and that's humility.
Yeah.
In other words, not claiming.
Nobody's done it all by themselves.
Right, yeah. And I've certainly found, and I imagine that this could even be a component of your success, that not having a big ego and not having to project yourself, it takes the threat away and it takes the fear away, so people feel relaxed.
Yeah.
I mean, what I saw in the documentary about, at your shareholders meeting, people felt like family.
They do.
And you treat them like family.
And the truth is they are, and they know the difference.
So another thing I noticed in the course of your talking in the film was your emphasis both in terms of your commitment to the civil rights movement and also to women's opportunity on equality of opportunity.
It was 50-50 whether I was born a female or a male.
Yes.
And I didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
And it made a big difference in 1930 when I was
Yeah.
born. I have two sisters one on each side, and they had they had more talent than I had. They certainly had better personalities, and one way or another, they got the message every day: never never explicitly always, that their job was to marry well. And I got the message I could do anything. And that, I've seen it in action. It really makes me enormously optimistic about the future of the country to think we came so far, and during 90% of the time, we didn't use half our talent.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous,
Yeah.
but that was the
Yeah.
situation.
Actually, in the mid '80s, when I was with the New York City Partnership, there was a whole generation of CEOs retiring, and so they were getting more personal because as they approached retirement, and a lot of them talked about because their daughters were coming into the workforce and how unfair it was, and I think there was a shift which isn't completed yet, but which was in process at that point, because some of the people who had influence were suddenly feeling it in their own families and wanting their daughters to be able to have an equal shot.
Peggy, in 1950, I went to Columbia. That's 30 years after the 19th Amendment was, Columbia Business School, 30 years after the 19th Amendment, one woman in the class. Wow. It was the same way with civil rights. That's what really got me about civil rights, was that people just didn't think about it.
Yes.
I mean, it was fine for them, so they just went on their way.
Yeah. So you had these values, and I guess Susie was already thinking about how to give back to make the difference. But you always said that your role was to make the money, and
Yeah.
that you...
I'd pile it up and she'd unpile it.
Yeah, and
That was
I
the
mean,
idea.
what a perfect thing.
Yeah, well, I thought I'd be good at what I was doing. I thought she'd be very good at what she was doing.
Which she was, and it
Yeah.
sounds like your children are also being...
Yeah, they're terrific.
Yeah, but in terms of when you made that decision to give the initially $1 billion to each of your children, did that like come out of the blue, or did you have family discussions about it? How did that?
Well, we didn't have so much family discussion. We had wealth wasn't really a discussion with the children. I mean,
Yeah.
they were out of the household before they even knew we had, and they didn't have any expectations in terms of it or
Yeah.
anything. So, in the 1990s, at some point, my wife had had this plan from when we were in our 20s, which goes back a long way, but we decided, we'd seen families where money messed everything up, and we'd seen families where money enhanced it. I mean, the money was neutral, but how people behaved with it changed things in a big way.
Yeah.
And we knew the kids now are starting to grow up. I mean, they're more mature. Went out of work when they were 20, but and we felt very good about how they were going. And we had this one foundation that was destined to be of really great size, but
That was the one Susie was running? Or-
yeah, exactly. And it was the only one we had for
Yeah.
for 40 years or so. But I decided that the last thing in the world I wanted to have was money cause problems within the family, and it just seemed very logical to have a separate foundation for each one that would work totally independent of me. I would not be on the board and anything, and but where they could each follow their own passions, maybe Howie in farming, maybe Susie in early education, but whatever it might be. I told them that I would never be judging one versus the other, that in philanthropy, it's hard to have an accurate scorecard, and it's very long-term, and I want them to fail some, otherwise they're trying things that are too easy.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm not keeping any scores on you at all, and I will add to this as we go along, but I will add equally. Whereas if they were if everything had to come through the big foundation, there would be times when they disagree, and when they would disagree, they might remember at the next meeting. And I'd seen too many problems associated with that. So we started very small in one way. And then one Christmas, somewhere in the 90s, I incorporated 3 entities, and just at Christmas time told them that I was putting a fair amount of money in, and then got added to subsequently, and it's worked fine.
So that part may have come as a surprise to them when it.
Oh, it came as a big surprise.
Oh my goodness.
No, it was a big surprise. It was more than a surprise. It was a big surprise.
And were all three of them already headed in the direction of being involved in either philanthropy or social action or whatever?
A bit. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we talked a lot about it.
Yeah.
That sort of at that point in their lives.
Yeah.
So they knew then that there was going to be a lot of money coming someplace, but the idea of having three different ones had not been discussed with them, in our case anyway, it worked out to be a terrific decision. It's the nice thing about it is if one has a good idea, the other two can join in, but it's
Yes.
voluntary.
Yes.
And you know, there's none of this 2-to-1 stuff or anything
Right,
like that,
right.
or resentment about anything that, you know, her alma mater got more than
Yeah.
this one or something of the
Yeah.
sort. So this way, they can each do things that they're good at. They
Yeah.
can pick their shots, and if they have something that their siblings regard as a particularly good idea, fine, they cooperate.
Nice. Well,
It's been good for the family. I mean, forget about philanthropy. It's
Yeah.
been good for the family.
yeah. Well, I mean, you tend to say that Susie had all the sort of human sensitivity, but that sounds to me like it took a fair amount of human sensitivity to make that decision.
Well, I had her there helping me all the time. Believe me. No, she
was still around when
she
you
was
made
still
that
around,
decision.
absolutely.
I
No,
see, yeah.
this happened many years,
Yeah.
and
Right. And then when she died,
then I had to rethink things.
you had to rethink it, and that's when you were getting to know Bill and Melinda, and
Yeah, it was an obvious decision. I always like to let other people do the work, but I want them to have the same values I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can find somebody that is implementing your desires, in effect, and they'll do the work, and they're younger, and they've got more energy, and they can take a longer view out because of their age. But it's important to having the same values.
Yeah.
And in the case of Bill and Melinda particularly, they were working at scale
yes.
already.
Yeah.
But their belief that every life is of equal value is 100% in sync with me.
Yes, right. So that was the basis of
Yeah.
sort of the values behind that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did mention $1 billion each, but actually I doubled what each of the three children, on my birthday a few years ago, I just decided they'd done such a good job. I ought to.
That's so
Yeah.
nice. Another example of trusting someone, really putting it to them that it's up to them to do
Yeah, it's up to them.
the important
Exactly.
work. That's great.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear about yours and Bill and Melinda's thinking about the Giving Pledge. And what I gather is that you just wanted to set the standard by inviting anyone to join and then not interfere with how they gave away the money.
We do that exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
we want people to wealthy people to re-examine, what they really believe in. I mean,
Yeah.
your dad set up the dinner, and there were probably 14 or 15 people around the table, and Bill and I were just exploring. In effect, we didn't have any set outcome in mind, but we wanted to talk to people who might otherwise have trouble talking to other people. I mean, these were people that had trouble finding peers exactly, and they all had their own family situations.
Yes.
And fortunately, I happened to call on Eli Broad and Edie first. They were on my right down at the end of the table. I said, just tell us why, how you've gotten to your present charitable philosophy and so on. Not necessarily a pitch for any
Yeah.
given thing. And fortunately, I picked two people that really opened up, and that set the standard. As I went around the table, people talked, and they
Yes.
talked like they don't. A lot of them wouldn't talk with their own families.
Yes.
They talked like they would, talk with, maybe they talk with their lawyer that way, but they really talked about what meant something to them, and it was a huge success in the sense that it gave me an insight, Bill, as to how much these people cared, but what they were struggling with in many cases in terms of their family, a whole bunch of things. So,
Yeah.
thanks to your dad setting up that dinner, I'm very grateful to him.
Oh, that's great. Well, I know he was very happy to do it, and
He was
he
happy.
was already intending to give away more than half of his
Oh,
assets
sure.
anyway.
No, I didn't have any
So-
questions about him.
Yeah.
But out of that came the feeling that people did really want to learn more about philanthropy, to learn more about families in philanthropy, but it's turned out to go way beyond what I anticipated at the time. People, it was a need that was we ended up meeting, and we don't try to get people to give any given causes or anything like that. I mean, this is to help them with their philanthropy, and fully as important, maybe even more important, is through the letters to convey to generations to come how other people that maybe the young people 50 years from now will admire. That's why I particularly like to get younger members of this, the Mark Zuckerbergs or whomever, and people get their values and ideas from someplace, they usually get them from their heroes. And if by reading those letters, one of them or two of them strikes a chord with somebody 30 or 40 years from now, it may result in huge sums directed by very smart people who have been inspired one way or another.
We've found that we have some overlapping families who are members of the Global Philanthropist Circle and the Giving Pledge, but not only those. We've found that creating what we call the safe space, which I think is what you were referring to, in which people can bring up the things that are not only in their minds but in their hearts. I mean, sometimes difficult family situations, you know.
Peggy, I've had people crying while talking to me about it.
It's amazing. I mean, we actually find we rarely have a meeting where at least one person doesn't cry. And the way I see it is, if people feel safe, they allow themselves to be a bit more vulnerable, and then other people respond to that, and then the trust begins to get built, and then their hearts open, and then the rest is all about love on the one hand and being open enough to really examine what strategically is going to make the most impact.
That's what happened that night.
I bet it did. It's really great to hear that story from you. I appreciate it. So another quality that obviously you've talked about, in fact, I think you even had a license plate that referred to this, Peter told me, is about your thriftiness.
Thrifty, right. Some people should have said cheap. A little more polite.
Well, I loved that the opening of the film was about you going to McDonald's and your 3 different breakfasts that you ordered depending on how the market was doing.
I mean, that latter part I
you
fun,
made it up, right?
But it is true. The rest of the story is true.
Right. No, I liked that a lot. But I mean, in a way, thriftiness, and not cheapness, but thriftiness can go hand in hand with not being ostentatious.
And actually, if your money's going back to society, anything I do that wastes money that doesn't really have any utility for me, it's not coming out of me. It's coming out of it's really coming out of the foundation in the end. I'm spending the foundation's money. Because there's going to be huge amounts left over, and if I want to buy a $500 million yacht, I'm not paying for it. Actually, people who would later on get help in whatever, maybe family planning or something, are paying for it. It's their money. I was born in 1930. Since that time, the real GDP per capita in the United States has gone up 6 for 1. Now, if somebody had told my parents in 1930, your son is going to live in a world where you have 6 times as much stuff per capita, my parents would have said it's going to be utopia. And it may be utopia for me, but there's an awful lot of people that isn't. And our country will just keep producing more and more stuff per capita. I mean, we've got a market system that works. And it should distribute rewards unequally. I mean, that's part of a market system. But in this rich society, nobody should work 40 hours a week and have a couple of kids and be worried to death about whether they've got health insurance or decent schooling or whatever it may be. I mean, we can take care of everybody. We're a rich family, a super rich family.
You mean the country?
Yes.
And how do you relate that to climate change? I mean, the fact that resources can get scarce, or that, our use of resources, such as driving all over the place and emitting carbon.
Well, the market system works extremely well, except it won't measure in long-term societal costs, and that's where it's government's job to get in the picture. I mean, you don't want to mess up the market system. I mean, it will turn out things people want, but every now and then they want something that is borrowing.
Yes.
You can make it, whether it's strip mining. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that the market system is going to tell market participants to do, and it's in their personal interest to do it. It's in the short-term interest to do it, and society pays a price, and then society, through government, essentially has to take that on. We don't want them to shoot the golden goose, but we want to make sure those eggs get distributed a little more. We want the goose to lay more and more eggs, but we want to make sure they don't all go to me.
Yeah. And the last thing I wanted, because I've used up enough of your time already, is when Forbes did a thing of the 10 lessons from Warren Buffett. Your last one was give unconditional love.
Yeah.
And I found that very touching and very true. And I wondered if you'd be willing to just...
It's the most powerful force in the universe. I mean, and you can't buy it. The two most important things in many cases become time and love, and you can't buy either one of them. I got it. I didn't get it every place, but I got it in enough places so that it helped me enormously. And I've just seen the power of it. So if you're receiving it, you ought to be very grateful. And when it's appropriate, you can dish it out. It can't be uncritical love.
No, I mean, then it doesn't have the same value.
Yeah. I think it was Kierkegaard or somebody said, life, it must be judged backwards, but it has to be lived forwards. But the truth is, you really want to reverse engineer it.
Yeah.
What are you going to feel good about eventually? I've never known anybody that had a lot of people that loved them when they're 70 that felt like a failure. And I know plenty of people that have everything the world thinks would be what you would want, and their own children, basically don't like them, and they're failures.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good place to end this conversation, and I really appreciate
I appreciate you coming out.